Hello everyone, World's Okayest Painter here. I recently received a request about how I do power swords. And since that's a relatively simple process, I thought that that would be an interesting tutorial to get up on the channel, just to kind of start things off. First, I'd like to discuss kind of the paints that we're using. Your whites, which is what goes on first. I don't have an example handy as to what the end result looks like, but if you've looked at some of the reels that I've been posting recently, you'll probably find one on there that has this blue hue on it. And my painting methodology is not so much skill based as it is technical based, if that makes any sense at all. It is a process of using controlled chaos rather than what I would see as time consuming methods. So the kind of paint that we use, I just wanted to or bestow upon you some experiential knowledge just so that there is an idea of what to expect when using some of these. So of course you've got your standard Citadel paints, Corax White, and then White Scar if you want to make it brighter. Those are pretty straightforward. If you've used them, everyone knows Corax is easy to work with. White Star is not. It doesn't have great coverage, which can lead to a couple of coats and some frustrations that I've heard in the community, and that's fine. So if you have that, it's no worries. You can use those. Um, Then we can also touch base on stuff like Chimera. I purchased this when I was looking for an alternative to White Scar. Truthfully, it's fine. It is a White Scar brightness titanium white. It's you get a lot for what you pay for. But it's fine. I am currently trying to get through this bottle and using it as much as I can, and there's a lot in there. Alternatively, what I find to be a little bit more preferable is the Duncan Rhodes Tooth and Coats. You've got White Star, which is funny considering his origins, and then Trooper White, which is your kind of Corax equivalent. Um, White Star, if you want the brighter hue, that's the one you're going to want to go with. Same process as usual. Trooper White underneath is going to be a little bit easier. There is another brand that I find to be particularly interesting, which is Golden High Flow. This is something that was recommended to me when I first got in the hobby, and it is pretty affordable. You get a lot, clearly. One thing I will note is it does have high flow in it. If you've ever used high flow, maybe you've learned through experience the dangers of having high flow. I say danger very loosely. It's not like a health hazard or anything. Don't drink it, you know. But if you use high flow, one of the things that will happen is the high flow. It's a I don't know what it is on a technical level, but it is a substance that increases the fluidity of the paint. It's I believe contrast paints from Citadel also have high flow in them. And what you need to be wary about is if you're using specialized brushes like that use natural hair, especially if it's a sable brush, Kolinsky sable. That high flow, if it gets into I believe it's the furrow of the brush, which is just past the ball right here. If it gets into that, it can really screw up that brush entirely. It'll get deep in there to the point where you can't really clean it out, and it will start damaging the ball of the brush. And when I say damaging, I mean that it gunks it up and then prevents it from narrowing to a point. So if you're using high flow, you want to use like something that you can really beat the crap out of, like these synthetic um, Citadel brushes are really good for that. Um, if you waste, if you get something in there and it messes it up, you're out $8. Whereas with the Kolinsky Sable, depending on how large it is, it can go 20 to 40 to $100. That's obviously the $100 ones are the larger brushes. So, but and if you're like me, you've got a couple of starter brushes that you came out with, like these Army Painter ones, that you've already got that issue. See how it's all gunked up back here? This is still a viable brush for utility purposes, so I keep it around, and I do use it for stuff that we're going to be doing here, because that uh, stuff that goes on the sword once you get your white coat is also golden high flow. It is fluorescent blue specifically. I have every line that they have. This is fantastic for Chaos plasma pistols and plasma guns, or just lens flares and things like that. Their fluorescent equivalent of yellow, um, yeah, that one. It is very difficult to distinguish it between the green. Then they have the magenta, and that is a viciously violent magenta once it goes on and dries. Those they didn't have a fluorescent red, but they did have however you want to pronounce that red. It's a good equivalent. For whatever reason, this one has a similar side effect of drying that the white has, in which it comes out with like a, trying to think of how to describe it. It is like a almost like a rubberized, like a really thin rubberized coating. It makes it difficult to go over. If you're just wanting it white and just wanting a really bright white, whenever it dries and cures and you've done the coats that you need to get the white the way you want it, a lot of times it's going to look extremely glossy, almost like wall paint. Just be aware of that. Be aware of using high flow paints that have high flow, and be aware of how these paints look when they dry and cure properly. So just for this tutorial, we will be using the Chimera just to get through that bottle. It comes out in a pretty good consistency. It usually just needs minimal thinning. And we will be using, for this, these Citadel base brushes. This is a base M that is synthetic. And for the white, I usually just get the brush to be moist. You don't want a ball of water at the tip. So once you give it a dip, give it a dry on a paper towel or something like that. And then this guy's already base coated to a degree. And then we'll just kind of, bear with me. So we're going to need a couple of coats of this, obviously. And there's a myriad of ways to do power swords. You don't have to pick mine. I just wanted something that was simple, that didn't require a lot of technical knowledge, and used my preferred method of controlled chaos. And you'll get to see that a little bit, what I mean by controlled chaos, whenever this thing gets to the point where we can put the fluorescent on it. So I'm going to let that dry, that first coat dry, and then I'll be back to get another one. Okay, so this guy didn't take very long to dry. We're going to go in with another coat. And you'll have to forgive me. This is the first recorded tutorial that I've done for this channel, this new channel that I'm making an attempt at something with. So my recording setup is not really designed for being user friendly. I just kind of have a really not even the world's okayest tripod. It's bad. So I'm trying to focus on two different things at once. So it's kind of hard. You can kind of see that there's a little bit of black showing up underneath that. I'll try to add some more paint. A little bit of a party foul there, but that's fine. Okay, second coat, and we'll let that dry. Okay, so I have off camera done another coat. This time thinning it down a little bit more to the consistency of what is referred to as glazing. What I've noticed is that final coat, if you're in a position to do this, obviously with finer details, like if you were to do glazing on like the front of the shield, it's probably going to pool into the recesses and it's going to screw up whatever you've done underneath it. It works best with these flat surfaces where you've got a lot of space to work with and a lot of space for that paint, that super thin paint to go in places where it's not going to be a problem if it drifts out and around where you're painting. What I've noticed that does is it goes into the recesses of the brush strokes and kind of helps smooth everything out, gives it a nice finish. So now that we've done that, now we can move on to the blue. So we're using the fluorescent golden high flow. If you've ever used fluorescence before, it looks really cool under UV. I've done a couple of Halloween events where the majority of the stuff that we've used, like terrain, I dry brushed with some UV paint. So everything was like lit up, kind of looked like a 90s laser tag facility. But anyways, it's really cool stuff. I like it. And it's bright, which is nice. So you don't have to mess around with layering and things of that nature. So with this time, the brush is a little bit extra moist. So with that, what that's going to do is when we add it to that high flow paint, it's also going to thin it out a lot more. And so this is kind of when we start working with the controlled chaos aspect of my painting style. So we've got, you can see it's a pretty loose consistency. And what we're going to do is we're just going to let nature take its course. Just do a coat like that. Let me go ahead and flip this real quick, and I'll do the back, and then I'll go kind of into some further details, because there are a couple of aspects of this you need to worry about. Looks like we've got, yeah, a bit of dry paint. That's probably from the nozzle. So you could push this around a little bit. You can pull it off the recess with the brush, and it's gonna kind of leave some space for that white to pop through. So this looks pretty good. We're going to let him dry. One thing I will mention with this method, if you've got a sword or anything really, you can use this. So if you're a Grey Knights player like me, I use this for Nemesis Force weapons specifically, because I went through a lot of different methods that just wasn't really giving me what I was looking for. The lightning is easy to do enough once you get a thin enough brush and a nice flowy paint. I can show that much, later on if that's something that is of interest. But to get kind of the mirrored sheen that some people like on their force weapons, it looks beautiful. I like it a lot. I have tried to do that. Didn't turn out the way that I liked it to. So I looked for something that's a little bit faster, that doesn't require a whole lot of technical skill. Something that I can do, because I like to paint fast. I like to get stuff on the table. I like to play the game. I'm not looking to win Golden Demon submissions and stuff like that. So this made it a lot easier for me. The glazing method, I tried that on Nemesis Force weapons. I'm sure if I practiced that a little bit better, or a little bit more, I would have gotten to the point where it would have looked nice. But I was just really struggling getting that mirror look on the sword. So before this, what I had been doing is I would do a bright silver rune fang, and then I'd go over it with contrast. Talisar blue was something that I used. If you want something similar to this that doesn't use golden high flow, I believe it's called, let me see if I can reach over here. It's not Pilar Glacier. That is a super, super thin contrast paint that I did not have a good working relationship with. It is barely any coverage. Frostheart, there we go. So Frostheart, you can do this with this white as well. It kind of gives you a similar effect without the fluorescent glow. Frostheart is really good for Nemesis Force weapons that I had found. If I did a silver or something bright, I would go over it with Frostheart, kind of in the same manner, thin it down, that kind of thing, and it would come out looking pretty close. The reason I switched over to Golden High Flow, not just for the fluorescent, but I feel like it was brighter. It was a lot brighter, and I wanted something that looks like it's got a glow to it. So there's a couple other things. There's so many different ways that you can do this, and feel free to mix and match these kind of styles to your specifications. Don't feel like you have to paint in one way or another. Don't restrict yourself. So we're just going to wait for this guy to dry before we go further. This is pretty much it. The only other thing that you maybe want to do, if you don't want that, I don't even know what you would call it, the stem that comes out, you can kind of see it's in the middle of the blade, that gives it the power field whenever the sword is activated. If you don't want to leave that in a bright white, I leave it most of the time as a bright white, just kind of make it look like it's got the appearance of being activated. If you don't want that, you can go over it with a lead belcher or something like that, and then once that's dried, you can go over it with something like you can kind of do a little bit on the very tip where that bulb is, with maybe an Eldar Emerald, something that kind of contrasts with that blue, or a darker blue, maybe a thin Talisar, maybe a Pilar Glacier, something like that, just to kind of give it that activated effect. So this is pretty straightforward, and you can also, if you do like the silver of the power swords and you don't want something that looks like a beam saber of sorts, which is kind of what we're doing here, you can do your lead belcher, whatever metallic you want on your sword, and then where the power cable goes and that bulb is, you can just focus the white on those areas so that whenever it dries, you can kind of go over it with your fluorescent blue or your frost heart or whatever you want to use, just to kind of add like a glow to it, and that'll give you the more, I guess, classic box art effect. So power swords you can do all kinds of things with. Um, Again, primary reason for this, for me, I want something that looks cool, that's fast, that's not super technical, that doesn't leave a whole lot of room for error. And this is what I ended up coming up with. So I will let this guy dry, and then I'll just show you the quick finish, and then we'll be done. Alrighty, so that is about done. So you can kind of see what the principle behind this is. As the capillary effect helps move paint away from the raised edges, like the middle of the sword, where the crest is, and away from the edges of the blade, it moves all the fluorescence inward and automatically highlights it for you. So there you go, quick and easy, nice. So that's pretty much the gist of it. I hope this has helped in some way, shape, or form. If you don't apply this method, I hope it at least gives you an idea to use for some other project. And that'll be the end of it. So if you got anything out of this, if you enjoyed it, if you want to see more, as usual, engagement is always nice. Like, comment, and subscribe as always. And everything's going to be okay. Have a good one.